Kreg come up, this Dr. Kreg Leymaster from place in Nebraska. A few of us have been up there and listened and there's some slides from their nursery up there.
Feel free to stand up or stretch if you want to know if you want to kind of sit. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Are there any of those left?
These are. It's a pleasure to be here. I've known Ron for many years. I get more calls from Ron than anyone else in the sheep industry. That's the truth. You know what I'm talking about? What I want to share with you today is you hit on some of these topics already. I want to talk a bit about research that we've done to evaluate different breeds of sheep, the importance, I think, of how shepherds and sheep interact with one another and how we can apply science to that. So we'll keep this very informal. If you have any questions, if I say things that don't make sense, by holler. In a bigger sense, what we're really talking about, not only with regards to sheep and agriculture, is sustainable agricultural systems now. And Bobby Mosher, the dean at Ohio State, I've known him for a long time, and he talks about four things. I think these are very important. One's production efficiency. We all understand what that is. That's just like what we were talking about. It's inputs and outputs, and how do we convert feed into weight and things and so on. Economic viability really has to do with already producing a product that the consumer wants, so that they'll pay enough for it that it's worth our time and effort to raise sheep or raise crops or whatever it is. Environmental compatibility, we're all more aware of that, being good stewards of the natural resources that we have. And then social responsibility is really dealing with animal well-being issues, which are becoming more and more important all the time here in the U.S. and the public's perception of how well we raise livestock and the feeding rights. So these are the components that Dr. Mosher talks about in sustainable systems. And I hope that some of the things that I mentioned here today, you can understand how they fit into this. My ideas on sheep production have changed quite a bit over the years, and I think it's perhaps is in line with some of these ideas now. I heard Ron mention that he's lazy, he doesn't like to work, but I kind of get in that way myself at times. So here's what I think of in terms of what it takes to have a profitable commercial ewe flock. It's awful important. Sheep don't need individual attention. If you have to sort a sheep out to treat it and so on, and that takes your time, that really draws, that really cuts into your profitability, I think. So sheep that don't need that, can take care of themselves, are very important. Ewes that are healthy and long-lived are important. Your flock, if you don't have to bring in, if the ewes are long-lived and you don't have to bring in as many ewe lambs, it takes less labor. The older ewes are more productive. So longevity is an important issue. Ewes that give birth to multiples unassisted is very important. It's a matter of how much time you spend out there in the lambing barn. If you want to turn it into a full-time job, or you let sheep do their own work, which they love to do. It's very important that ewes and lambs bond very strongly at lambing time. Again, it relates to labor. You have to spend time getting a newborn lamb to nurse or to bottle feed it to help it out for a while. And that ability of ewes and lambs to bond is pretty critical. As is milk production. You can have ewes that produce too much milk. What you want, I think, are ewes that produce milk that meets the requirements of that lamb, whether she has a litter of 2 or 3 or whatever. So getting those things balanced is important. But the bottom line, I think, is this: it's lamb survival. And will those lambs survive and thrive on their own or with very little human intervention? That's letting sheep be sheep and you doing other things, just like the last talk we had. You mentioned seed stock producers. Have we got any seed stock producers in here? I'll be careful what I say if we do. None?
Tell it like it is.
Huh? No one's fessing up to it?
Tell it like it is.
Well, I suspect that over time, we've done more damage to sheep than we have good. We've made them less functional now than what they were. Sheep have been, isolated. Well, they've been domesticated for about 11,000 years. But they've been around, that's only about 1% of their evolutionary history. And the previous 99% of the time they did fine without humans. And I think a lot of the things that we've done to them over the years have made them much less functional and profitable for you, for a lot of reasons. So I can be critical of the seed stock industry, but we all have a role that we can play in this, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But I think lamb survival is really the key. How much labor do you put into keeping a lamb alive? So I want to go through and present some information on 2 experiments, and it won't take long to do this, as background for what we're presently doing with the research now. So we conducted a large experiment. My colleagues started it. We're looking at 5 types of crossbred ewes. We had Romanoff crosses, Finn crosses, Dorset, Texel, and Monadale. You guys are sheep folks, I don't have to explain what those breeds are probably. The Finn was in there because it came into this country as a prolific breed first. We brought the Romanoff in later and wanted to compare the Finn and the Romanoff to one another. And the Dorset was kind of in there as a standard, and we wanted to see how well the Texel and the Monadale did for reproductive traits relative to the Dorset. So we had those 5 types of breed crosses. We kept those crossbred ewes through 3 parities when they're bred in the fall. And then this is the productivity of those 5 types of crossbred ewes in a fall breeding system. Okay, what this shows is that the Romanoff crossbred ewes were about 24% more productive than Finn sheep crossbred
What were
ewes.
they crossed with?
These were crossed on 2 different types of ewes. One of them was a straight bred Rambouillet ewe, western type of Rambouillet, and the other one was a speckled ewe. It was half black face and half Columbia, what it was. So in this study, and I know we've got Romanoff people in here and we've got Finn people. My point isn't necessarily the one's better than the other. Our job is to provide data, and you can decide what you want to do with that data, right? Okay. Okay, so Romanoff are more productive than Finn sheep. But the point is, the Dorset's kind of in here is a very typical type of breed. The Finn sheep are also much more productive than the Dorset. So here's 2 prolific breeds. There's advantages and disadvantages of those. If you look at the productivity of the Romanoff relative to Dorset, that's 63% more pounds produced for every ewe that went into a system in a ewe lamb. If you look at the total pounds that ewe produced over her first 3 parities. We also bred, after they lambed the 3rd time, then we kept them over and we bred them in the spring. We bred them in March and May in the spring to see how well those breed types did in out-of-season breeding. And in that case, the advantage of Romanoff is even greater than what it was in the fall breeding system. And that happens because the Romanoff breed breeds out of season better than any other breed that we have in this country. This shows what happened to fertility rates for crossbred ewes bred in March. They're really all quite high at around 90%. But then when you look at May and June are really tough breeding seasons for sheep. You see that the Romanoff basically maintained the same fertility rate in May as what it had in March. And the others are starting to fall off. So if you are interested in breeding out of season, the Romanoff is probably the best germplasm to be doing that. Okay, so that work got done in the late 90s or so, and we were starting to think about where we wanted to go with this. And this is kind of my take on what I thought of the sheep industry, or producers in the sheep industry anyway. I think most people thought that sheep weren't capable of performing well on their own. Even though they involved, thousands and thousands of millions of years, producers tend to think that they need help, that sheep need help.
Don't you think it's because we got lots of 500 in a pile? If ewes were limited in the mountains, bighorn sheep would be, maybe there'd be 40 ewes in a flock, and I don't know what they do during lambing. I guess they probably get in some rugged country and lamb kind of together, but that's not the same as...
I think producers believe that we have to have high inputs in lambing in terms of labor to make a system work. And I think you believe that because guys like this teach that in classes, don't you? what else you gonna talk about? If you don't talk about tube feeding and